Hi, everyone. It's Becky. This week is a little different. As many of you know, I'm at San Diego Comic-Con. So instead of a new episode of Hanging with Becky, I wanted to share something special from the archives. Back in 2001, before Hanging with Becky existed, Adam Rackoff and I created a podcast pilot called The Movie Insiders. The idea was simple. We would share personal stories from our careers in the film industry and give listeners a behind the scenes look at what it was really like to work on some of these movies we loved. We were so proud of it. And we even had podcast agents and pitched the show around, but it never found a home. And the pilot actually sat on a hard drive for 5 years until now. So this episode is going to tell the story of my experience working on the international release of Terminator Salvation. As a lifelong Terminator fan, if the series had been picked up, the next episode would have featured one of Adam's stories, working on Full Metal Jacket Diaries. But this was the only episode we ever recorded. So recently, Adam and I listened to it again for the first time in years and decided it was finally time to share it. And it was also kind of exciting to think that I could release it in my feed on my new show as a way, because I had thought about giving it to Film 89 to put on their feed, or Wrong Reel. So it was more fun that now that I kept it. This episode is so special to me because it is my story of working on this movie. But Adam, before we play it, isn't it kind of exciting that we finally get to release this episode we're so proud of to the world?
I know. It's kind of insane that only a handful of people have ever actually heard this recording, because we were, as you said, sharing it with our agent and a few friends that kind of gave us some feedback. But for the most part, this is like a long lost episode podcast that you're getting a chance to share on your new, it's obviously format is different than what people are getting used to with Hanging with Becky, but that's kind of what's fun about it. You know, it's a unique window into where we were 5 years ago when we were trying, and I'm so excited about getting this podcast out into the world. So
yeah, it's fun because we have a whole intro to it. And actually, we will have the intro and outro music be Hanging with Becky, because there is a version of this pilot that it was the original pilot that Adam and I loved and were proud of, was an hour and 11 minutes, which is what you're getting right today. Yeah. But we worked with our agents and we cut it down to 46 minutes, and it had really fun music attached to it to go out to sell. But because this is my feed and we didn't end up, we can do what we want, we decided let's put that additional 25 minutes back into the show that we were kind of bummed about taking out. There was just little small details. There were names of people I called out that we took out, things like that, just for timing. So it's fun to put the episode out that actually Adam and I loved, that we had edited down to this thing that we thought was perfect, and then the editor sort of trimmed it down even more for selling. So now you guys get to hear the full episode.
We're releasing the Becky cut.
The Becky cut. That's a great way to word or think of it. I love it.
Hashtag Becky cut.
Hashtag Becky cut. And we talk about maybe this movie in the pilot. Maybe we'll start a campaign to release the Terminator Salvation cut, right. The Mick G cut.
Yeah, that's another thing I'll say. Last thing I'll say is that I haven't really thought about. We both really feel that Terminator Salvation is an underrated, underappreciated film, and it deserved better, and deserved, as we go into in the podcast, to have a full trilogy set in the future world. But we of course we never got that. But I think I haven't really thought about Terminator Salvation since we recorded. It's almost like I put the movie in the back because I wanted so badly for this podcast to happen.
Yeah,
I sort of haven't watched or thought about this film since then, and now I'm kind of like, you know what, maybe it's time for a revisit. You know, I want to rewatch the film again, because I really think it's really, I mean, again, I want to see the Mick G cut just as much as anybody. I would love to see that happen one day. But even the film even the director's cut, which we talk about, is really good and and available, on Blu-ray.
I think the thing that we are excited about when you listen to the episode is you'll hear is we really think this film should be relooked at, that there is a cut out there that I was absolutely in love with, but I still really love Terminator Salvation. We kind of gush about McG and his filmmaking techniques too. So shout out to McG if you ever get to hear this, because we were really proud of this movie. We were proud of you. And so you have a big part in this episode too. But we do hope this episode, after listening to it, it helps you reevaluate this movie, because I think some people unfairly dismissed it the first time they had seen it. We didn't. We both loved it from initial watch, but we talk about my story of working on it, things had changed, that there's still some footage out there that we'd love to be released full screen. So anyway, if you're a filmmaker or somebody that worked on this movie, we love you. And I was very proud of working on this movie, the international release of it. And then also Adam and I want to call out that I'm wearing a Terminator shirt for this intro. And I think Adam, if you want to share your shirt.
It's not a Terminator shirt, but it's like a robot with a film camera head. So it was the closest I could come up with.
Yeah. We decided to put on some fun shirts just for this, for this cool intro. So before we, I just want to enjoy it. Hope you love it. Consider this a special bonus episode, a little time capsule from 2021, and a glimpse into a podcast that almost was.
Yes.
We hope you enjoy the movie Insiders, and we'll be back next week with the brand new episode of Hanging with Becky. Hi, this is Becky Deanna.
And I'm Adam Rackoff.
And this is the Movie Insiders, a weekly podcast where Adam and I tell personal Hollywood insider stories about the movies and franchises we worked on in our over 20 years in the movie business. And this week, I won the coin toss, and I get to talk about my personal story of working on Terminator Salvation, which means the spotlight's on you next week, Adam, when you get to dish about Full Metal Jacket. So does that mean you're going to bring jelly donuts for us and unleash an insane amount of profanity on the episode?
I will try to keep it PG, but I think it's actually good that we're starting with Terminator Salvation, because it's a film I really love, and I actually have my own connection to this film as well. But we'll get into all that later.
Great. I think we should give you guys some background on who we are. So I'm going to go first. I've been a movie studio executive for over 20 years, working at 20th Century Fox, where I worked on the first 3 X-Men films and Moulin Rouge. But the bulk of my career has been spent at Sony Pictures Entertainment, where I worked on 3 James Bond films and 6 Spider-Man films. One of them won the Academy Award, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was so cool. And we'll definitely have to cover that movie on a future episode, because I can't wait to tell you the Burrito Peter story.
Well, I loved Spider-Verse. I'm a huge fan of animation. I've worked on animated films, and I'm a huge comic book and Marvel fan, so I'm very jealous that you got to work on that film. Well, I co-founded a production company with actor Matthew Modine, whom you may know from Full Metal Jacket and shows like Stranger Things, where he plays Dr. Brenner. But yeah, I've spent the past 2 decades producing and marketing films. My very first job is actually working for Merchant Ivory Films in Paris, which was an incredible experience. And I also spent almost a decade working for Apple Computer in marketing, and it was there that I produced their Meet the Filmmaker event series and podcast for iTunes, where I got to meet all types of filmmakers and creative professionals, including Mick G, who we'll talk about in this podcast.
Cool. It all comes together. So we're not only industry insiders, we're also movie fanatics. So we see everything from art house to big budget movies. Let me tell you about some of the filmmakers that I love. They are Ingmar Bergman. I often call myself an Ingmar Bergman disciple because he's like a religion to me. I also love Albert Brooks and James Cameron. And if that's not eclectic enough, my top 5 favorite films are Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Broadcast News, Defending Your Life, John Carpenter's Halloween, and Ingmar Bergman's Summer Interlude. That's a lesser known Bergman film, but it's wonderful and wildly romantic, and you should definitely check it out if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, I've actually never seen that one. I do need to check it out. I mean, I consider myself a total film and tech geek. I love classic films, going back to silent films and everything in between. I love comics and I love science fiction. In fact, Becky and I are both massive science fiction fans, and it's actually how we met.
Yeah, it's how we met. We started podcasting, I think, like 5 years ago, and we met guest hosting on a podcast about James Cameron. We like went through his whole filmography, just like geeked out for I was like 2.5 hours or something. And I remember it was like a YouTube video too, so don't look that up. I'm a little embarrassed about that. But we also, what did we geek out about? We geeked out about Star Trek. Yes. We did Next Gen. We had a whole episode on the original series. And I'm a big original series fanatic. I think you're more Next Gen. And
I love them both.
Yeah.
But yeah, I first discovered Next Generation. That was my entry point, and then I kind of backtracked to watch all of the original series episodes.
Yeah, and you guys might obviously don't know this, but Adam knows a little bit of Klingon, so he maybe we can convince him to open up an episode one day with some Klingon. I have a Klingon dictionary, but I don't really know it that well.
It's very hard to learn, and I only know a few phrases, but maybe I'll introduce a future episode, as you said,
nice.
in
and
Klingon.
We also talked about Twilight Zone. So, Adam, What's your favorite Twilight Zone episode?
I absolutely love The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street.
Oh, nice.
And The Midnight Sun. Those are two that when people ask me, like, oh, I've never seen a Twilight Zone episode, what should I watch? I'm always like, start with those two.
Yeah,
I think they're just fantastic. But there are so many. And I mean, there's some that are just very iconic. But for me, those are two that always resonated with me as a kid when I first saw them during like an all-night marathon on New Year's Eve. I was probably like 12 years old or something.
And we had those marathons in California. So, Adam, another thing, we have East Coast, West Coast rivalry here. So I'm West Coast, I'm in California, and Adam's in New York. It's funny, so California, we mostly did Thanksgiving marathons, but then also Midnight Sun was, I think about that episode every summer when it gets excruciatingly hot in LA and it's like 118 degrees. We have some weird day and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm living in this episode of Midnight Sun right now.
Yeah, we can't tell you the twist because we hope you go watch that episode, but there is a fantastic twist at the end of that episode, which is trademark Twilight Zone. What about you? What are some of your top episodes?
Oh my gosh, my favorite Twilight Zone episode is Time Enough at Last with Henry Bemis and his library books that he discovers. And I actually have a bobblehead of that in my office.
And I feel like this whole pandemic, we're living in that world where we finally have time.
Yeah, I'll get into my office a little later, but I have like a bunch of I have this Star Trek door chime. So when you walk into my office, it does the sound of the Enterprise makes when you walk through the doors there. So it's like, shoo. Yeah,
like that. Or no, that's the Next Gen version.
Yes, it's like swoop. I can't really do it, but anyway, it scares the hell out of anybody that comes to my office that's never been in there. They're like, stuff goes flying out of their hands, and then some people think it's cool, but for me, it's just like fun to walk into my office every day and feel like I'm walking through the doors of the Enterprise.
So some of my other favorite things also include James Cameron as a director, and like you with Bergman, I am a huge Stanley Kubrick fan. I also consider myself a Kubrick disciple. I try to read every book about him, see every documentary about him. I've actually worked on some of those more recent documentaries. So I love everything about his films. I've seen them all dozens of times. And I also love Steven Spielberg, especially his early years. I'm a huge Alfred Hitchcock fan, and I love Orson Welles. But the three films that really inspired me to want to work in the film and technology space were Tim Burton's Batman in 1989, Jurassic Park, and Terminator 2. And much like Star Wars did, I think, in 1977, I feel like T2, for our generation, for the people that grew up in the 80s and early 90s, that was the film that launched 1,000 careers. For me, it was definitely that film. It was one of those movies that just made me want to be a part of this film industry. How about you?
Yeah, it actually inspired me to get in the movie business and really changed my life. So I saw T2 opening night, July 3rd, 1991. And I still remember, and I saw it with my parents and my sister. And I still remember being in the back seat of my father's car, driving away from the theater that night. And I was in awe. The movie completely floored me. It was a sci-fi masterpiece. And when I say it changed my life, it did, because it was the film that made me fall in love with movies. And ultimately later in life, I realized that what I wanted to do for a living was movie marketing. I wanted to go out and tell people about movies like this that can change your life and promote and increase awareness of movies. I never wanted to be a filmmaker. It just seemed so much more exciting to me to be a part of working on a ton of different films, event films, and telling people about them. But it was funny because I remember the weekend after I saw the movie, I went on this road trip with my friend's family, and we did like this pit stop at a gas station, and they were selling at the gas station this Terminator 2 magazine, and I freaked out, and I bought 2 copies, one so I could preserve and one so I could cut all the pictures out and, put in my bedroom when I got home. And then also we went to this movie theater on that vacation, and the movie theater was selling T2 posters because the movie had just come out, and I freaked out again, and I bought the poster. And so when I got home from that vacation, I put the poster up and I cut out all the pictures and I put them on my closet doors, and I was obsessed with Ever Furlong. I had a huge crush on him. We were the same age. And that was pretty much my closet doors until I went to college. And pretty much anyone that's met me since I was 14 quickly learns that T2 is my favorite movie. I don't think you know me very long without knowing that about me. And what was cool is, so when I started working at Sony Pictures, we were able to pick out art to put on our walls from like this catalog, and T2 was a TriStar release, and so they had the T2 poster. So I got super excited and I picked the T2 poster. So now I have the Terminator 2 poster hanging up behind me in my office at work, and I always think to myself, I wish I could, go back in time and talk to my 14-year-old self and tell her, that poster that's hanging in your bedroom right now, it's going to be hanging up where you work one day. I think I would just never have believed my future self about that. But now it's insane. Like now my office is filled with like endoskeletons and Terminator collectibles. And I'm such a fanatic that I always felt like if I had a son, I would name him Connor after John and Sarah. But I ended up having a little girl, and so I gave her the middle name of Reese after Kyle Reese.
I love that.
I'm a massive, massive, massive Terminator fan, and I love the mythology. And one of the things I love the most about it is Bill Wisher, who co-wrote T2, once said how the Terminator story is very much like It's a Wonderful Life, because it says your life makes a difference. And on the surface, you're nobody, but you could be the most important person in the world. And that's what I love about this franchise. I mean, there's this kid who's being told his whole life that he's going to save humanity. And like, you think about what that must be like to have to deal with knowing that you're going to save humanity one day, and that one day you're going to meet your dad and he's not even born yet. And so I think the franchise is profound, and I absolutely love it. And T2's really inspired me, like I said, to get into the film industry, and has sort of permeated every single part of my life since.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm a massive Terminator fan, and I vividly remember going to the theater to see this movie on opening night. It was the Campus Theater in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. It was a beautiful old Art Deco theater, single screen. And I went with one of my best friends at the time. We were both 13, and I know the movie was rated R, so I'm not even sure how we got in. It's still to this day, I'm like, what did we just pay? And they didn't ask it, they didn't even say anything.
I think they were a little bit more lax in those days.
Yeah. Or maybe like it wasn't like the hardest R ever, so I don't know. Maybe they just thought it was just a little bit of violence, so it's okay if some teenage kids go in.
Got carded when I saw T2 the second time,
Really?
And we had to run after my dad's car, which was almost out of the parking lot, to like come back to like buy the tickets for my friend and I. And it was weird because I got carded again when I saw T3 and I was 25, and I was like, no, I'm actually 25. But it was so weird. Like the 2 times I ever got carded was to see a Terminator movie, which is weird. T2 and T3.
Which, when you were way over the age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always
but that's flattering,
younger.
right?
Yeah,
it's nice to look young.
Except I I feel like when you're 25, it's not flattering when they don't think you're up, 18.
Right.
So
yeah, you grow up wanting to look older your
Yeah.
whole teenage years, and then once you're actually old, you just want people to think you're younger then.
Yeah,
It's like this
exactly.
weird
And I feel like in your
thing.
20s, you don't want people to think you're not 18.
Right. You want to be like, yeah, I'm a grown up now. But yeah, it was a mind blowing experience for me. And from the moment that T-800's foot crushed the skull in the future, I was totally hooked. And that future war scene in particular, which is only a few minutes long, it just, for me, it's still one of the greatest opening scenes in any movie of all time. And like so many people, I wanted more of that. And I always hoped one day we would get a future war movie. And it wasn't obviously until many years later that we would. But after seeing the film, though, I got so hooked on the franchise, I went out and bought T2 trading cards, T2 comic books, magazines, just like you. I even have, to this day, still a Terminator 2 pinball translite framed on my wall in my office. It's basically the back glass artwork on a pinball machine.
Oh,
which
yeah.
So I have that on display, and
I
I
actually
love
took
the
a
artwork.
picture. There was a T2 pinball machine at a Hard Rock in Hollywood. And I remember when I was 16 years old, I still have the picture of me like geeking out in front of the T2 pinball machine. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And people were like, hey, freak show.
Yeah.
It was exciting.
It was a great game. I mean, I had so much fun. I wasted, I don't even know how many hundreds of dollars in quarters on that pinball machine. So that future war sequence, as I said, the whole movie blew me away, but that particular sequence made me want to see more of it. And as I said, we had to wait almost 2 decades to get it, but I remember when I heard that they were going to finally make a film set entirely in the future, I was so excited about this. And Becky, you were working at Sony at that time when you heard that Sony had acquired the rights to a new Terminator film. What was that like for you? It must have been, as a fan. I mean, I know I would have been just out of my mind.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it was. It was insane. I mean, the day that I found out that we had the international rights, it was like Christmas and my birthday all rolled into one. I mean, one of my dreams was to work on a Terminator movie one day, and I just never thought I'd get the chance to do that. And what was cool was that I actually did work in international marketing, so I got to work on the movie. It wasn't like I was in domestic and thought, oh gosh, I can't work on it. It felt like fate that I actually was in international marketing and we got the international rights. But reading the script was interesting. And really it was funny because I don't think I've ever read a script that was it was very secret. It was probably one of the most secretive scripts I've ever read.
Even the superhero film franchises, were they more secretive, or was this really the...
Oh, yeah, I guess you're right. The Spider-Man films are definitely more secretive than Terminator. Terminator was pretty up there. Spider-Man films are interesting because I remember, so with Spider-Man Homecoming, they get exponentially more secretive as each movie came out. And I mean, I worked on 6 of them, but like, I remember at one point with Spider-Man Homecoming, there was like a 2-hour window I had to read the script, and it was like Mission Impossible, like self-destruct in 2 minutes. So I read it and I had 2 hours.
You really had to read like 1 page a minute.
Yeah, I had to just jam through it or else
Yeah.
it was going to expire, I remember. And then with Far From Home, I mean, dude, they wouldn't even let us read the script. It was I remember going to some meetings where the producer would give us a few nuggets about the story, and then she would allow questions. So you would ask questions, and then you would try to like put together like a linear narrative based on the questions you asked. So like somebody would ask something, and then you knew that was the ending, and then this other part was the beginning. So I remember I actually had to go to London to really tell the story to some of the international marketing managers. It was like the small group of them. And I remember the night before I was like Frankensteining the story based on my notes to try to figure out a linear way to tell them the story because I never read the script, and I just from these meetings. And it was hilarious because I remember our German promo manager thought, I know that there's a scene in Berlin. Can you let me know what happens in Berlin? Because we might have like a travel angle there. And the only thing I knew that happened in Berlin was that Peter Parker gets beat up. So I was like, so I remember I said to him, well, pretty much in Berlin, all I know is that Peter Parker gets beat up. And he looks at me and he's like, I don't think there's a travel angle there. I was like, no,
come to Berlin, we'll beat you up.
I know. And so I'm like, I can't really tell you. I don't know, what happened there.
Yeah.
So that was funny. And that's the thing is that you couldn't really give more weight to it other than knowing bits and pieces. So that was definitely crazy. And then it was funny. It was like Skyfall, which was, that script had, they were revealing key characters were coming back from the franchise. And then there was a key death. I remember just reading that script on a plane once on the way to a conference and thinking, should I have been able to read this script? This is like really secretive stuff and stuff. So that was nice. They trusted me. But the Terminator script was pretty secretive in the fact that, so I had to go to a conference room to read it. And I couldn't read it at my desk. And it was weird because the last 10 pages were gone. So they didn't even allow us to read the ending. And they really wouldn't allow anyone to. And, the script was okay. And I think all along, I always knew, or maybe I just wanted to believe, because I'm such a huge fan, that it was going to be a great film because, it had to be, right?
Right.
But I knew it was going to be about the future war, which was the sequel I always wanted. And I didn't want another sequel where Skynet sends another Terminator back to the present day to kill John Connor. I always wanted to see the future war that you only get glimpses of in the first two films. So it was exciting to me that we were going to make a movie set in the future. But I remember reading the script and being like, this is okay. And this is fine. But then it kind of went awry at the part near the end where they had these like hybrid Terminators, which they ended up ultimately taking out of the movie. And I remember there's this part at the end where John breaks into Skynet, and then there were like these hybrids driving around on these golf carts waving to him. What? And I was like, what is happening? But again, it wasn't like I was like devastated reading this. I think most of the script was pretty good, but I think I just assumed they were always going to fix it. And they did. Paul Haggis and Jonathan Nolan came in and ended up rewriting the script, and they didn't get credit for it, but they changed the script and made it what it is. But I read the screenplay, which was by Michael Ferris and John Broccato, who wrote T3. So I knew the script was going to have an evolution, but it was also funny because I remember being at my desk, like a few months after reading the script, and I got some like breaking news alert about the story being leaked online, the ending that was leaked online. And the ending when the movie was supposed to be that John Connor was going to die and the resistance fighters were going to rip the skin off John and put it on Marcus's endoskeleton so no one would know that the leader of the resistance had died. And I remember just being at my desk and thinking, what? There's no way that's the ending of the movie. Like, they would never do that. John Connor is the main character of this franchise. And how do you even make sequels when he isn't the leader of the resistance? And when it's not really him, it's a machine. It literally goes against everything this franchise stands for.
I know. I remember hearing that rumor online, and it would have nullified everything Cameron had established in the first two films. How would a cyborg version of John Connor in the future send Kyle Reese back in time? It just makes very little sense. Yeah, I just chalked it up to internet rumors, and there's always so much information, obviously, on the internet that's incorrect.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And like, I would have like flipped the table over if I knew that was going to happen. But so I read this piece and I was like, no, this is crazy. Like, I've read the script and that's not what I read, but I didn't read the ending of it. So that probably was the ending, but I didn't know at the time. So I just remember thinking, well, that's not what's happening. That would ruin everything. So a few weeks later, I was in this meeting and I remember, so the EVP of marketing at the time, Sal Ledester, I'm going to get into him more later, but I remember we were like leaving the meeting and I turned to him and said like, oh, hey, I saw that leak online. That's obviously insane that that's the ending. That would never happen. So I know it's not a real leak. And he kind of looked at me and then just said, that ending was discussed. Oh. And I literally was stunned. My heart kind of broke that it was ever discussed. I was like, wait, what? I knew that wasn't going to be the ending anymore, but the fact that it was ever discussed, like, completely freaked me out.
Yeah, I just feel like it sounds like just one of those crazy rumors that can't be true. But how far back, so the film came out in 2009, so at what point, was this 2008, 2007? Like, when were you reading this script?
So it was I think it was early 2008. So they put
Wow,
out the
okay.
film in less than a year, because it was I started at Sony in June 2007. So it was I had only been there like 7-8 months when we knew the rights and we read the script. So yeah, and
Got it.
and I was like always like, there's no way that could be true. Obviously, it's an
Right.
internet rumor, and as far as I know, they never shot that ending. But the fact that it was ever discussed, I mean, I was like, let's burn this place down. I was so upset about it. So I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it's insane. But so when they started to, like I said, back in like 2008, I remember reading all about this. They were announcing the director and the casting. I mean, I remember one of the big things on the internet was that, oh, you can't have a Terminator movie without James Cameron or Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then they announced that Mick G was attached to direct the film, whom, a lot of people may not have known at that point in his career. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like for you at Sony when you heard Mick G was going to direct the film?
Yeah, I mean, I really didn't know a lot about Mick G. I mean, I knew he did the Charlie's Angels movies and We
Right.
Are Marshall, but I thought he was kind of an odd choice. And I thought he had sort of like a weird rapper name. But then I quickly learned as we went through the working on the movie how extraordinary he is, and also that's his real name, Mick G.
I know it's strange, but most people don't realize that Mick G's his real name is Joseph McGinty Nickel, and Mick G was the only name his family and friends ever called him since childhood. His uncle and grandfather's names were both Joe, like him. So his family decided, well, we can't have 3 Joes in the family. I mean, well, I'm not sure why they named him Joe then, but regardless, they did. And then they're like, well, let's give him a nickname. So he was given the name, his mom gave him the name Mick G. And that's what everyone called him. So he decided to carry that name into his professional career. And I get that. I mean,
Yeah.
if that's the name you identify with, if someone calls your name, Mick G, hey, come here. That's if they say Joe, you might not turn around, right?
Yeah.
You might think, who are they talking to? My name's Mick G.
Yeah.
So if that's the name that you go with, then great. Unfortunately, like you said, it kind of sounds like he gave himself a rapper name, even though that's the farthest from the truth. He's a very talented and passionate filmmaker, and a lot of people don't know he directed over 50 music videos in the late 90s. I mean, that's a ton of work. I mean, a ton of experience. And it was from his music videos that Drew Barrymore actually saw him and recommended him to direct the first Charlie's Angels film. So he definitely was a talented guy, and he obviously was able to impress the right people at Sony with his vision for this movie.
Yeah, and I'm so glad he did, because we'll get into more of his vision later, but he did a wonderful job with the movie. So, I mean, if someone called me Rebecca, I'd be like, who's that? So
Right.
that's my real name, but I go by Becky. So I get it. And I kind of feel like he's maybe a poser if he like decided to change his name to Joe
Right.
again. I don't know. It's cool. I mean, Mick G's sounds cool. So the head of my partnership group at the time, like, he dragged me down to this marketing conference at the studio where Mick G was attending. And he's like, you got to meet Mick G. You have to talk to him about Terminator. And I'm like, oh my God. So he kind of like shoved me in front of him to meet him at this conference.
Yeah.
And then I just like stupidly say to him, I'm a big Terminator fan. And then I say, I'm so lame. I was like, I was hoping you were going to use Brad Fiedel for the score. And so we kind of just looked at me, and he was so nice and sweet to me, but he essentially was like, well, I'm looking at a lot of other composers, and we are looking at them, but we're going to pick who's best for the film. And I felt like such an idiot for like blurting that out. Like, it's the only thing I say to him. But I also felt like it was one of the things that Terminator fans really wanted to know, because we all love Brad Fiedel's score from the first 2 movies. But you met Mick G too, right? It's so funny. What's that podcast? Meeting Tom Cruise, the new one. I felt like
Yeah.
we both have Mick G stories. We should start a podcast called Meeting Mick G.
Yeah, I mean, I did. In fact, it was during my time at Apple, when I was in the Apple marketing department, that I had a chance to meet him at the Apple store in Santa Monica on 3rd Street Promenade. As I mentioned earlier, we did a series of Meet the Filmmaker talks with directors in stores that had theater spaces, and that was one of them. So I flew out to California from New York and went to this event where Mick G was there. And I just have to say, after meeting him, he is just one of the smartest, most passionate people you can ever meet. Any doubts I had about him being a good choice were gone after meeting him and after listening to him speak at this event. And again, this was probably 2 weeks before the film was released, so I hadn't actually seen it yet.
Yeah, and isn't he like a big tech head?
He's just a massive tech head. He loves Apple. So he was a great choice to have in the Apple store, because he just knew everything about Apple and its history. Some of the things he talked about and told us were really fascinating. He talked about how they developed their own 35 millimeter film stock. They actually used dead stock from Kodak, and what they did is they burned it in the sun to give it a certain feel. And they actually ruined quite a few takes because they went too far with damaging the film this way. They also didn't really use green screens. They didn't use tennis balls for eye lines, which is a common technique used for CG characters that the actors will interact with. He really wanted it to be as practical as possible. And it's like he wanted this sort of gritty analog feel for a movie set in the future. So there wasn't very much CG, and they also used old Panavision lenses that weren't corrected properly. So all of these different elements sort of worked together to sort of make the film look like it was being photographed in a post-apocalyptic world where the bombs had gone off. And they also did, as I mentioned, as many practical effects as they could. So that meant they wanted to build all the sets, physically build them and blow them up. They built all the robots with Stan Winston's studio. He's just an incredibly smart filmmaker who knows every aspect of the filmmaking process inside out. And if you ever have a chance to talk to him or listen to him speak, you immediately just get inspired. And yeah, so that was my meeting Mick G story. So Becky, as such a huge Terminator fan, was Sony able to take advantage of your knowledge of the franchise to help with the marketing of the film?
Yeah, I think it's how I kind of got my name at Sony, because I had only been there a year, like I said earlier, but I think word started spreading like, hey, there's this crazy Terminator Rabbit fan that works here. And so people started talking about it. And I remember at the time, the head of International Digital came up to me and he asked me, hey, do you mind coming to this digital meeting to go over the Terminator franchise and answer any questions about the mythology and why this movie is important? And I said, sure, that sounds fun. But I just assumed it was going to be like 6 people. And so I remember I walk into this room and it was so many people. I mean, it had to be over 40 people. They invited all of digital marketing, including all the digital agencies. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, there were people literally sitting on the sides of the walls of this room, and it was nuts. So all of a sudden, I'm sitting there, and I have to talk about Terminator. And I remember the first thing he asked me was, "Okay, so Becky, can you tell the group? So what is Skynet?" And I remember sitting there for a second and I almost blacked out, because I was like, how is this my life right now? Like, how am I explaining what Skynet is? So, I'm saying, Cyberdyne created this revolutionary type of microprocessor called Skynet. But it was like, what is going on? So that was insane. But it's funny because as I got more invited to more and more of these meetings, I was with these really big senior executives explaining the Terminator franchise and why the movie's important and different. And then so I started getting more confident. And so I started bringing in this T800 endoskeleton collectible into these meetings. And I would use it to explain the difference between a T800 and a T600. And that, the T600 was 8 feet tall and it had rubber skin. And, at first we only had heard about the T600 in the Terminator when Kyle Reese had talked about it. And it was really through all the exposition he's doing throughout the movie. He mentions it. And that's really only the reference we ever had to it. But it was so cool about this movie. And what I was trying to explain to everyone is we're going to get to see the T600 for the first time. How amazing is that?
Yeah, it fascinates me that there would be so many people in a room like that in the film industry that just didn't know about the Terminator films. I think most of us who watch movies just assume that everybody that makes them is as massive a fan as we are watching them. And I guess that's just not really the case. We are massive movie fanatics, but not everyone that works on a movie is.
Yeah, I know. And, what I learned about being in the movie business for over 20 years is like not everybody is as into film history or knows certain films. And there's just like, there's this funny story where I have some weird ones, but I remember I had a new boss. I was trying to like connect with him somehow. And I walked into his office and he had just started putting in furniture and stuff into his office
Right.
and filling out his bookcases and stuff. And I saw that he had a French New Wave book in his bookcase. And I thought, oh, cool, I'll bond with him over the French New Wave. So I'm like, hey, like, who's your favorite French New Waver? Is it like Romer, Truffaut, Godard, Chabrol, Rivette? And he kind of looked at me like I was speaking some like alien language or something. And then he's like, what? And then I said, oh, the French New Wave book you have. And then he says to me, oh, yeah, I just got that in college and I just thought it looked cool on my bookshelf.
Oh my God.
So I'm just like, oh my God. And then they had another similar story where it's the same guy actually. I was the month of October and my phone ring was John Carpenter's Halloween theme. It went off in this meeting and my ringer almost never went off. I just forgot to turn it off. And then he's like, oh, cool, that's like some cool electronica song. And I was like, wait, what? And so I was kind of laughing. And then I was like, well, you don't know what this is? And then he didn't. And then I kind of turned to my, some of the people in the meeting and I said, well, you guys know what this is, right? And they didn't know what it was.
Oh,
and I'm like, oh my God, this is like one of the most iconic songs in like film history. How do you not know the Halloween theme? So sometimes you get, you're in situations like that where you, I don't know. So like someone's like what? You've never heard of Chinatown?
Yeah, it's odd for me. I work more in the independent side of filmmaking, so we're just so immersed in every aspect of filmmaking and learning all the tools of the trade and the history, and so it's just a different world, where we I just assume that everyone's like that. But again, there's like people, there are lawyers, there are accountants, there are marketing people, PR people, they're all really good at their jobs.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean they're going to be like this, the massive fans of Terminator that we are.
Yeah, and that's a great point because also really there's the film history point, but then there's also the point of just like not everyone knows everything about every franchise that's ever. Terminator, I was obviously that's how I shined because I was able to explain all these different machines and I knew Terminator so well. But like in the past when I was at Fox during the X-Men films when we first started that back in the early 2000s, I didn't know anything about the X-Men. So they would go in and they would have these presentations and explain like this is who these characters are, and then you start working on them. And as I worked on the first three, I mean, there was one point where like I knew everything there ever was to know about Nightcrawler. I felt like, and a year ago I never even knew who he was. And then we even had recently, like a few weeks ago, there was a big presentation at Sony about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I just to try to explain like how everything ties together, just to give you sort of background and stuff. I remember there was literally a slide about the Infinity Stones. Like they went through like every single Infinity Stone on its PowerPoint slide and what it means. But I mean, also like, sometimes we'll hear about like a partnership with Fortnite and I'm like, what the hell is Fortnite? So right. you kind of need, I now I'm like, early 40s. So I have to kind of, I'm like, I don't know what the kids are doing these days. What the hell is this? So I need someone to come in and be like, this is what Fortnite is. And this is the new teen sensation or whatever. So
that's what you did for Terminator, for the Terminator franchise.
Yeah. And like I said, it was a way for me to shine. And I explained that like the T-600 was the first in the Terminator series designed to infiltrate the human resistance. And they didn't do well because they were easily spotted, like Kyle Reese said. And in this movie, McG got Stan Winston and the Legacy Effects Group to put a lot of effort into making the T-600 look like this 8-foot tall machine, like literally wrapped in prosthetics. And it was so cool. And, you mentioned earlier about McG, like he really wanted to make this movie with practical effects. So he wanted an actual man to be in this T-600 costume and not have him be CG. So the actors are reacting to a machine in front of them instead of a green screen. But there were so many awesome Terminators in this film. And that's one of the big components of when I went around to talk to people about these movies. I had to explain to them what the different Terminators were and and why they were cool. We really only saw before the Hunter Killers and the T-800s before. And like you said earlier, like sometimes you run into actual movie fans that think Arnold Schwarzenegger's character is the same character in all of these 3 movies. And you're like, no, that's his model number. He's actually Cyberdyne Systems model 101, and there could be model 102 and 103 and 104. I mean, the T-800 is the endoskeleton type, and the model number is what you physically look like. So they're like, there's this warehouse in the future full of Arnold Schwarzenegger models. And that's why they're able to send these back in time. And it's a different Terminator. So it's not like all of a sudden the one that killed Kyle in the first film comes back to life and is reprogrammed to be good in the sequel. It's a different Terminator.
Exactly. There was even like, if you remember, the first like teaser trailer for Terminator 2 was the model 101 being like, molded, like the tissue being put onto the endoskeleton, and then you see Arnold's face come out. So I can't come out of like this mist. And I think that was sort of Cameron's way of showing, there's lots of these, particular Arnold Schwarzenegger looking models out there. It's not like he's one and done.
Yeah, so I had to explain that. And that's an interesting conversation you sometimes have with movie fans. Or when people, like you said earlier, like people say things like, why are we making another Terminator film? You can't do without Arnold. And it's like, well, let's see what the story is. If the movie's taking place in the future, how do you make it about Arnold unless you show his Terminator model in the future? Or if you want Arnold Schwarzenegger to be a human, one way you could do it is maybe he's a scientist, then that is creating these machines for Skynet, and they use his DNA or something to create like the skin of the model 101.
And that would have been really cool. I actually love that idea.
Oh,
and
thanks.
Maybe you should have helped write the script. No.
Well, it's something they could do if they ever want to use him in a future movie.
That's true.
Just make him be in the future as a human.
And I think one of the reasons he wasn't, he was governor of California at the time of this filming, right? So that was one of the big obstacles for him not being a part of the film. If I remember correctly, right?
Well, kind of. That was never important to me. I don't think as a Terminator fan, I don't need, if we're doing the future, which is again, which I always wanted to see, why do we need to see him? And this movie takes place before they even make his model.
That's true.
That's another thing. Look, I'm explaining it to you. Like that's another thing that I would go around and do. So in this movie, you not only get to see the Hunter Killers again, which we saw in the first 2 films, or Terminator planes, but then there are also these harvester machines, which are these. Which literally collect human beings for research and development for Skynet, and they are these giant insect like Terminators that essentially take the stem cells from humans they collect to learn how to grow human skin on machines. And so they are huge. And then they can unleash these Moto Terminators, which are Terminator shaped like motorcycles. And so because the harvester is too big and too slow to move, these Moto Terminators can chase after the prey. And then the movie also had these Hydrobots, which patrol the water, and they're like aquatic Terminators. So they're sort of modeled after eels. They're 7 to 8 feet long. And then they also had these machines called aerostats, which survey what's going on with the resistance. And they are essentially surveillance drones, which have a tiny inset camera that has a red glow. And so they're like smaller scout units than the Hunter Killers, whose job it is to spot humans. And then they also had these transport machines, which move the prisoners around. And then they even had T-700s, and those are the black metal Terminators that you see in the movie near the end. There's like a whole room where you see Skynet manufacturing them. And then you do get a glimpse of the Arnold Schwarzenegger model, the Cyberdyne Systems model 101 at the end. So that's pretty much the point where they're at the point where they've made their first one, and that one kind of gets unleashed. But what's so cool about all of this, and it's not breaking canon or anything, and is we only saw glimpses of the future before, so you don't know what Terminators existed in the future. And now we get to see it and all these other machines.
Yeah, we don't know. Obviously, we didn't know what came before the T-800. When you see you see the T-1000 in Terminator 2, you see what came next, but we never really saw what came before, other than what Kyle Reese talked about when he was telling Sarah about the future.
Right.
So this obviously takes place when Kyle was only a teenager.
Yeah, he's a teenager. Yeah, and then and John sends Kyle back in time in 2029, and this movie took place in 2018.
Right.
Yeah, and if you really want to get specific, the T600 is 7 feet 9 inches. But of course, Kyle Reese is going to say it's 8 feet tall because he's like not measuring them. But
Yeah,
if
he's rounding up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they probably look like 8 feet tall because that's pretty close.
Exactly.
The T700 is 6 feet 9 inches, and the T800 is 6'2". And really, Arnold Schwarzenegger is 6'2", which is probably why they made him that tall. So anyway, in the future, Skynet makes these machines, and they're ultimately getting better and better, just like an automotive line or a computer would. And so Skynet's trying to continually evolve them to pass for humans.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're in essence just trying to make them smaller and closer to human scale so they can blend in. And obviously, if they sent a 7-foot tall or 8-foot tall Terminator back to 1984, the world would be like, what the hell is that? So yeah, they needed to find a way to
and the skin was
something.
like practically falling off in plastic,
Right.
so you probably would never believe it was a human. So essentially that's what I did when I went around to these meetings. I would explain why these Terminators are cool, and also just talking about the psychology of the human characters. Like, we get to watch John Connor become the man he's destined to be, and Reese emerge as the hero we always knew he was. And so I would explain that what it would feel like to know that you're going to meet your dad one day, and you'll never get to tell him that you're his son, and he gets to meet his dad in this movie, and the emotional resonance that comes with that. Like, Sarah Connor Chronicles, the TV show, gave us that payoff for the first meeting of John and Kyle in the season 1 finale. There was this scene where John gets to see his 5-year-old father playing baseball, and then the ball kind of comes over to him and he picks it up and he hands it to them. And I legit cried my eyes out when I saw that scene. It was one of the best episodes of TV I've ever seen. So they give it to you there. But for me, I always wanted to see John and Kyle meet as adults in an actual movie.
Yeah, and it's like that idea of meeting your dad when he was a teenager. It's like Back to the Future. It's such a surreal concept to be like, that's my dad, and he's younger than you are, right? That's crazy. So
Yeah, and another cool thing that the movie was going to do is, as I explained earlier, so John is 33 in 2018 where Terminator Salvation's set, and he's 44 in 2029 when he sends Kyle back in time. And at the beginning of T2, you see John older, like he's looking through the binoculars, and you see the scar on his face. And then so in this movie, you get to see how he gets that scar. He's in a fight with one of the Terminators and he scratches his face. And it's a small little fan service thing, but I'm a fan and I totally geeked out. And I'm like, oh my God, that's how he got a scar.
Yeah, and I love the scar too because it's one of those scars where it kind of misses his eye, like it goes from his brow to his cheek. So you have to have a really good brow line for that to happen. Otherwise, it'll catch your eyeball. But yeah, there's a lot of fun fan moments in this film. I mean, Anton Yelchin as Kyle Reese, of course, says the same line that Michael Biehn says in the first film as Kyle Reese. He says, "Come with me if you want to live," and that's great. Of course, Arnold says, "Come with me if you want to live" in the second one. But John, it's one of those great moments. And of course, John Connor, as an adult in this film, plays the Guns N' Roses song "You Could Be Mine" on the boombox, which helps to attract the Moto Terminator.
Yes.
There's two elements here. It's the song, but it's also the Moto Terminator because it's John Connor as a young boy sort of working on his bike in his garage when he's listening to that song on a boombox. So there's two little
oh my gosh,
fun
I'm hearing it in my head
throwbacks.
Right now.
I know. And of course it was the music video, the famous Guns N' Roses music with all the footage of Arnold in it.
I was in love with Edward Furlong. He's the same age as me. And so, I'm like, one day we can get married. We're the same age. So I was such a
well,
geek.
I thought he was the coolest kid. I was like, I need to grow my hair like that.
His hair was the best. His hair still looks great now. 30 years later, it still looks amazing. Yeah.
But yeah, so let's talk about the editing because for me, my wife is an editor and I've done some editing. I love, and I know a lot of filmmakers feel that the editing process is sort of the most exciting part of filmmaking because it's sort of where you discover the film, because typically directors will shoot hours more than what will end up in the final film, and it gets slowly whittled down. You assemble, sometimes they'll assemble a movie and it might be 5 hours long, and then you have to find a 2-hour movie out of that. So did you ever get a chance to see any early cuts of this film, because I just feel like, based on what you were saying about the script and how much it was changing during the production, there must have been lots of stuff that we didn't see in the final cut.
Yeah. So there were multiple test screenings of this movie, and I saw several different versions of them. So I mentioned Sal Ledestre earlier, who's like the EVP of International Marketing at the time. He and his right hand, Josh Mattis, they both sort of took me under their wing and brought me to all these meetings because I knew Terminator inside and out, and they wanted to make sure I was part of these meetings, that I had a voice, that I saw every screening, and they wanted my input. So I was just like, I don't know, a manager at the time. And it was so cool that I was able to get to see all these different screenings and be valued in that way. And again, I think one of the reasons why I ended up getting promoted eventually was because I had such a role in this movie and meeting all these executives. So anyway, it was very important to Sal that I saw different versions of the movie. And so I would attend these test screenings and see these films, and I would send my notes to Sal. Afterwards, he told me he would send them to McG, and I believe he did. I never got any direct feedback from McG, and my notes weren't like, change this, change that, because like, who am I? But it was more like, I really like this part, or I thought this part could be explained more. But there was a version of the movie I saw that was just like everything I ever hoped for in a Terminator sequel. It was so extraordinary. So first of all, Bryce Dallas Howard, who played Kate Brewster, so she was John Connor's wife. She had so many great scenes in the film, and she's like very expressive. So she says a lot with her eyes. And she's great just being understanding with John and talking to him. But you can kind of tell when you're watching the movie, Christian Bale will say something, and then the camera will like pan to her, and then she will just look at him, and then it will go to the next scene. So it looked like there was something cut there, but in the stuff they cut was she had these great speeches, and she was very inspiring. I mean, you saw that John would listen to his wife just as closely as his top officers in the Resistance. And in particular, there's this great scene before John goes off to Skynet, and they talk about their unborn child and how important they are to each other. It's just like a really beautiful, warm scene, and it just gives so much depth to both of them. And it got cut for some reason. The version I saw had that great scene, and it also had this other amazing scene. So at the end of the movie, John Connor's hurt, and you think he's going to die. And so he ends up looking over at Kyle, played by Anton Yelchin, and asks him to come over. And he gives Kyle his jacket. And in the movie, it's implied that he's giving his jacket to Kyle because he's letting him know, you earned this, and now you're part of Resistance.
Right, because the jacket had that armband on it, which was a symbol of being a member of the Resistance. So it was a very symbolic gesture without him saying it, without him saying, like, you earned it. He was...
Yeah, it was implied, yeah. And so,
Right.
the armband. So John is like a hero of his because he hears him on the Resistor radio. And so it's a big deal that he gives his jacket to Kyle, and the audience realizes this when they're watching the movie. And so then after that, then Marcus decides to give up his heart and give it to John so John could live. So at the very end, you see Kyle burying Marcus, which is also cool because you find out in the movie and throughout the movie that Marcus is part machine and part human. So they're burying him as a human. So Kyle's burying him and wearing the jacket, and it's a really sweet scene. And then you see Kyle reach into his pocket and pull out a Polaroid photo of Sarah. And we know from the mythology and these first two films, John is the one that gives Kyle the picture of Sarah that he ultimately falls in love with and travels across time for because he loves her and to save her and to save John. So it's like a really profound scene, and it really had an emotional impact on me when I saw the movie. Everything about the movie was so well done and perfect. And it had such a great tone. And all of the Bryce scenes and the end was just so moving. And I was like, this is everything I ever wanted. And I love that you get to see that John was not only giving him the jacket so he could be part of the Resistance, but because he really thought he was going to die. And he was thinking, this is how I give Kyle Sarah's photo. So it was just really wonderful. It was a test screening, and I remember, so when the movie ended, I left so the moderator could ask the audience questions about the film. So I remember I walked out into the lobby, and there was one guy out there who was on the phone, and I had never seen him before, and I still have no idea who he is. But I remember, I'm not sure if he was like a Warner Brothers executive or an agent or what, but he was livid about this scene with Kyle burying Marcus. And he was like, I hate this end scene. It's like some cheesy Western, and why is he burying him with some makeshift cross? It looks awful. We got to take it out. And I'm thinking, who is this guy?
Yeah.
I was like, he's crazy. Like, the scene is amazing. It's like one of my favorite scenes ever in a Terminator movie. And so after the screening, I remember I sent Sal this like breathless email afterwards. Like, this is everything I ever wanted. And McG has done an amazing job and how much I love this movie. And please tell him, like, thank you as a Terminator fan. Like, I was like literally gushing. So anyway, so a few weeks later, they had this friends and family screening. And I was like super excited. I couldn't wait for my friends to see the movie because I was just, like I said, everything I ever wanted in a sequel.
Yeah.
So since I worked on it, they let me bring my husband, who was my boyfriend back then, and then two of my friends. And I remember being in line outside the Anthony Quinn Theater, and we were like all excited, and I was gushing about the movie, like, oh my God, it's everything I ever wanted. And there's one scene was great, and blah, 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 whatever. So anyway, so we get out of the movie, and it was good, but I was kind of watching the movie in shock because all these scenes were gone from the movie that I had seen before, like the Bryce scene that I just mentioned was missing, like the great speech she had, and like there was other scenes with her that were missing, and then the Kyle Reese scene at the end was missing. And my friends were like, oh, the movie was fine. And I'm like, no, there was this great, but the version I saw was everything. And you didn't get to see the movie I saw. And anyway, so I was kind of confused. And so I remember when I went to a meeting on the film a few days later, and I asked in the meeting, like, well, what happened to the movie? Like, they took out this, they took out that. What happened to the Kyle scene? And when are they going to put it back in? And I remember that was another time where Sal kind of looked at me and said, oh no, that's the final cut of the movie. And I was like, wait, what? It was like my heart broke because it was a good movie, but I still don't know. Like, no one ever explained to me why these scenes were taken out. Like, if it was because of the running time, or maybe because that exec and or agent or whoever he was in the lobby hated it so much, like the ending.
And he clearly didn't know the Terminator franchise, or he would not have been so angry about that short final scene. That's so bizarre.
Yeah, and so for some reason they took out all this stuff out, and it was heartbreaking. And, the movie's great. Like, I really enjoy this movie, but there's a version of the movie out there that I saw with this Kyle photo scene at the end and with Bryce and a few other things that existed. And they exist out there, and I just don't know where it is, but I hope to see it again one day.
And they exist. They're actually out. Like, they made a print that they projected in a theater for you to see. So that version is assembled somewhere.
I know. Like, please, like, take it out of the vault. Where is this version?
Right, exactly.
I want the world to see it. But what's weird is that, so, like, no one ever talks about this Kyle scene at the end. And I just assumed that, like, no one knew it. It's weird. Like, I never hear interviews where anyone talks about it, like directors or anything. Oh, it's a bummer we took the scene out. Like, it's just like it didn't exist. And so when the director's cut Blu-ray came out, I remember being so excited. Like, of course, McG's gonna put it on the director's cut Blu-ray, and I couldn't wait to show everybody once it came out. But then I watched it and it wasn't on there, and I was like, why is there no deleted scene? Why isn't it inserted into the director's cut? There was this amazing line that McG put back in the director's cut where Blair Williams says, you can focus on what is lost or fight for what is left. I loved that line. But that line was like literally 10 seconds, so I don't know why it was taken out of the movie. But he put it back in for the director's cut, but he didn't put back in the Bryce scenes or the Kyle Reese ending. And honestly, it wasn't until a few weeks ago that I even knew that end scene existed somewhere where you could watch it. So the code name for this movie is Project Angel. And a few weeks ago, I was just being silly and I Googled it. And this website came up where they talked about scenes that were cut. And they mentioned that this Kyle ending is on it. And it was said it's like on this like maximum movie mode version of the director's cut.
Right. Yeah. They call it the maximum movie mode, which is something that I don't think it really caught on after this. It was done for maybe 2 or 3 movies in 2009 on Blu-ray, but I don't see any current movies having maximum movie mode on it. So I think it was something they were sort of dabbling in, experimenting in. But if you've ever watched a movie with a director's audio commentary, it's similar to that, but sort of with visual components added in, because in this case, you see McG standing next to a smaller screen, and he's talking about the film, and he's analyzing certain scenes or sharing storyboards for sequences that were written but never filmed. And this, of course, was one of the scenes that he does show in this maximum movie mode towards the very end of the film. But I like you, I didn't even know that this maximum movie mode even existed before revisiting the Blu-ray for this podcast.
Yeah, I didn't know it existed either. So if you watch it, near the end, McG shows the scene, but it really doesn't have, because like, I went back to my director's cut. I'm like, how have I had this in my house like for the last,
right.
11 years and not have
Yeah.
known that I had it? But anyway, so I go back and watch it, and it really doesn't have a lot of resonance when he shows the scene, because there's like no music. And then also McG's standing right there next to this box where they're showing the scene. Like, they don't even show the scene in full screen.
No, it's like this little screen that's at an angle next to him, and it doesn't go full screen, which one would think. I mean, I don't know why they opted to just present it this way.
I don't know
like
either.
You said, why not include it as an actual deleted scene as a bonus feature?
Yeah,
it's just
like,
a very
it was
strange.
so dismissed, and I don't know. It's just a weird way to present this like epic scene that I just love so much, and so like, I want them to release this scene. Like, can we just release the scene in full screen, please?
Yeah, me too. I mean, and it really is a shame, because while I like the director's cut, and I think it is a little bit better than the theatrical version, the director's cut that's on the Blu-ray release, it really only adds, a little bit less than 3 minutes of new footage. And honestly, one of those minutes is just a scene where Moon Bloodgood's character is topless in the shadows. And it doesn't really, it's like a quiet moment. It doesn't really add a lot to the overall narrative of the film. And there's obviously some trimming of certain shots for violence, because they were going for a PG-13 rating with this film, which was actually the first Terminator film to be rated PG-13. So some of those shots were re-extended back to where they were originally, but really we're not talking about very much footage. It doesn't really change the movie in any way. So it's unfortunate. I did get to see an advanced screening like the week before the film came out at the Warner Brothers screening room in New York, but it was a theatrical cut as well. So I never got to see this earlier cut that you're talking about, and I really love this movie. So I really think it could have been a little bit stronger, though. That's the thing that always irked me, is that I felt like it was there's so many things to love about it.
Yeah.
But the scenes that you're describing are kind of the things that I felt were missing. So I hope one day.
Yeah, like you said, it could have been stronger, and not by adding a lot. Like, this is my favorite of the sequels after T2, and I really think people should revisit it. But
Me too.
it's really well done. But these additional scenes do add a little bit more weight and give it more heart. And sometimes I hear the criticisms of this movie is that this movie didn't have enough heart. But the Bryce scene with her and John had that heart, and the Kyle scene at the end had that heart too. And there are other great scenes in that film that exists now. That Kyle scene where he is in the transport, and like you mentioned that quote the other day.
Oh yeah, I've always loved the line where Kyle Reese says, "The most important thing we can do right now is stay alive. In here," and he points to his head, and in here, and he points to his heart. And I was always moved by that line, because it's his way of telling these prisoners who are being carted off to be experimented on or terminated that they can't give up, that they have to stay alive. And even though he's only a teenager in this film, this is sort of a hint of the man Kyle's going to become when John sends him back in time to protect Sarah in the first film. So I found that this line really, really sort of foreshadows who Kyle's going to become as Sarah's protector, and making sure she doesn't give up in the face of the Terminator trying to kill her.
Right. Yeah, and just to wrap up my journey on this movie, other than that heartbreaking test screening, I mean, ultimately it was fine. I accepted it. I had to go to therapy or anything. But another, this is my podcast therapy, I guess. Another really cool thing that happened to me was, because I worked so much on the movie, going around telling other executives about the story, and Josh and Sal wanted to give me something that showed the filmmakers thanks for everything I did. So at the Paris premiere of Terminator Salvation, they had a piece of concept art from the movie, and it was the Capitol Records building that had been destroyed in post-apocalyptic Los Angeles. And so they had asked the cast and filmmakers to sign it for me. And it was like it was really amazing. And I didn't even know this was happening. And what was even cooler was that I heard later that Josh carried it on his lap on the plane from Paris all the way back to LA so it wouldn't get bent or anything.
Wow.
And I remember my boss at the time handed it to me in this envelope and said, "Oh, Josh and Sal wanted to give this to you because they were traveling." And I literally burst into tears because it was like one of the coolest things I've ever received. And it was just so amazing. And so like Christian Bale signed it and Anton Yelchin wrote, "To Becky, thank you for everything." And Moon Bloodgood wrote, "Thanks for all your hard work." Like everybody but Sam Worthington signed it because he was filming Clash of the Titans, so he wasn't at the Paris premiere. But the coolest one was from McG. He wrote, "Becky, thanks for terminating all the non-believers," which I just loved because it made me feel like, too, like he really knew that I was out there, like, you know, speaking the good word about this movie.
Yeah, and you're still doing it right now.
Yeah, I am. I mean, it was so great. It really meant quite a lot to me that they gave this to me.
Yeah, and I've never heard that story, but you once shared a picture of the framed artwork on your wall. I've seen a picture of it, but I hope one day I can see it in person because it looks amazing.
Yeah, I got it professionally framed, and it's like my most prized possession now. Like, it was so sweet of them to do that for me, and I had no idea that anything like that was going to happen. And it made me feel so good. Like, it was literally, it was a dream come true. Yeah, and then, so the movie did okay. I mean, it did really well internationally. It was #1 in 66 of the 70 territories we opened it in. So, you know, it kind of killed it internationally. And our box office was 66% of the worldwide box office. It made $246 million. Domestically, it made about $125 million. And there was a plan to make 2 more sequels, but it didn't happen because Halcyon ultimately went bankrupt. So they had to sell the rights to the movies. And McG was actually contracted to make the next 2, but because they had to sell the rights, that all went to whomever bought them next. And Sony actually did bid on the movie 2 times before because they knew how important this franchise was and really wanted it. And I was really rooting for Sony, but neither time Sony won.
Yeah, it's a shame because I really do think that Terminator Salvation was such a great starting point for a new trilogy.
I agree.
It laid all the groundwork, and it probably would have gotten better from here. I mean, as I said, I really like this film, but I think the next 2 would have just...
Oh, they would have been amazing because then you got ultimately what we all knew was going to happen was that we were actually going to get to see the future war, really, and then we get to see John and Kyle get closer and they fight side by side, and ultimately he sends Kyle back in time, and that would probably be the 3rd film. Like, they beat Skynet, he sends him back in time. So, like, yeah, we kind of knew what was going to happen, just like with the Star Wars movies. Anakin was eventually gonna become Darth Vader, but like, how did he get there, and how cool is it to get to see that? And like, I really wanted to see that, and I felt
too.
like
I think everyone back in 1991 who, as I said in the beginning, that watched that opening Future War scene, we all just were like, I want this movie. I want to see how all this happened.
I know. And that's like I try to tell people about this movie. Like, again, how cool is it that, like, you don't know what Terminators existed in the future, and now we get to see all these different Terminators. So it's also just really cool to get to see, you get to see it's different. You get to see it in the daylight. So, which I know some people were, I only think of Terminator in the dark or whatever, but it was cool. Like, it was just so different. But I don't know. I'm bummed about the reviews too. Like, it got 33% on Rotten Tomatoes, and you look at the bad reviews, and none of them are like, this movie's like an abomination or anything. Like, they just say, like, yeah, the movie was good, or it was okay, like, or it was more like it lacked heart. It wasn't like I hated the movie. I mean, the good reviews were from critics freaking out and loving it, like Empire Magazine, who gave it like 4 out of 5 stars. And some people loved it. I mean, I loved it. And I thought it was a Mad Max style sequel and better than I ever imagined it would be. And I was so incredibly happy to see the beginning of this future war again. And I felt like McG really understood the franchise and understood the motivations of the characters. And like I said before, I really do hope you listeners seek it out, maybe. And now that you know that there are different scenes, and maybe McG will release these scenes, or even a version of the movie that I saw.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cut I wish I could have seen. It sounds like those additional scenes really helped to add some of that humanity back in that some of the critics seem to think was missing. But thanks to you, we all now know that this alternate cut exists, and maybe we're getting the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. Maybe one day we'll get the Mick G cut of Terminator Salvation.
Release the Mick G cut. We got to start like a campaign. Just so I can see it, man. You guys help me out. Start up this. Let's get it. Let's get them to release it. It's got to be somewhere in some warehouse or something somewhere.
And that's the thing. It does exist. It's not like it has to be. There's a tremendous amount of work being done to make Justice League ready to be released as the cut that he originally wanted. This is out there. It was ready for projection for you to see in a theater. So it shouldn't be terribly difficult to bring it to the world if the demand is there.
Right. So that's my insider story. I hope you enjoyed sitting with me in the boardroom and the screening room when I saw these test screenings and really just getting insight into the vision that McG had for this film. I also want to say all the stuff that I talked about around Terminator Salvation, that was me going around and talking to executives about the movie and seeing these test screenings. That wasn't even my job. That was just stuff I did on top of my job. My job was to work on partnerships for this movie. So my actual day-to-day job was approving, Domino's partnerships around the world to like terminate your hunger, and we had a Pizza Hut promotion to get your salvation from hunger. So it was funny. Nice. and we also had like an Energizer partnership and Jeep and 7-Eleven, and we did a lot of cool promotions, and that actually is what my job is. But what was so cool was because of the fact that I was this like fanatic Terminator fan, the studio knew what they had. They're like, oh wow, well let's make use of the fact that there's somebody here that works here who knows everything, and let's get them to go around. And like I said, it made a name for myself. And there's a lot of people at Sony that still call me the Beckinator.
Oh my god.
I know. I recently. I mean, I don't sign my emails the Beckinator, but there are some people that in some of the local offices that still call me that, which is funny. And
that's
hey,
funny.
I'll respond to that if you call me that. I might not respond to you saying Rebecca, but if you call me the Beckinator, I'll turn around and be like, what's up?
Not to be confused with Baconator. That's a Wendy's sandwich.
Oh my god, the Baconator. Please don't call me that, but that's hilarious. Anyway, so next week Adam's going to be in the hot seat to talk about Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to sharing some insider stories about Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket and working with Matthew Modine on his Full Metal Jacket diary project. And we both have lots of other great insider stories on movies we've worked on that we're going to share with you this season. Yeah,
I have some really cool stories on Moulin Rouge. I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I can't wait to get you guys into some of the ins and outs of that movie because there's so many cool stories on that one. Yeah. Skyfall, and even X-Men. Like I said, I worked on the first 3 X-Men films, and I remember still, it was like a surreal moment. I remember walking, I was like 23, and I was walking down the hallways of in this Fox building, and I remember walking by this boardroom filled with men in suits, and they were talking about like Wolverine and Professor X, and I'm just sort of thinking like, this is like what again? There's another experience of like, how is this my life right now? Like I'm walking by a room, people just talking about these comic book characters. So it's pretty cool.
That would have been my dream job at the age of 21 or something.
Yeah, and so we're going to take you through all these fun things that we went through, like our personal stories and what that was like, and just some cool insider tidbits about, like, just like I did on this episode.
Right. Did you work in the Fox building that was the Nakatomi Plaza in Die Hard?
I did.
You did? Really?
Did. Yeah, you didn't know that?
I didn't.
I worked. It was like the coolest thing. So I worked at Fox for 5 years, and all 5 years I worked in Nakatomi Plaza. Yeah, which actually was called Fox Plaza. But it was kind of cool. They used to put up a big Christmas tree and stuff. But Fox would never hold a Christmas party on Christmas Eve. That's the real evil. And when you think about Die Hard, like
they should have been home with their families.
Yeah, what kind of company holds a Christmas party on Christmas Eve? No, sorry, I'm not attending that. That was kind of a fun thing. I used to always tell people like, what's up? I work in Nakatomi Plaza.
That's
like
awesome.
That's me. Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah, I never told you that.
No, I mean, I remember you sharing once that you went to like an anniversary screening
Yeah.
outside of the plaza.
Yeah, I did for the
of
Die Hard like Blu-ray release or whatever. But yeah, that was a few years ago. That was pretty cool. But no, I actually worked in the building for 5 years. I worked on the 5th floor. And that was what I did every morning. I walked into there, and I never, Bruce Willis never had to save us or anything. But but it was pretty cool.
That's cool. Yeah, and I have some other fun stories as well about meeting and working with some of my favorite filmmakers, including J.J. Abrams, the Coen brothers, Zack Snyder, and even Rian Johnson. I know he's a divisive figure, but he's a really talented filmmaker and super passionate guy. And I got to meet him when he was just finishing up his movie Brick in 2005.
Love that movie.
Yeah, so that was like his calling card. That's what put him on the map. So I'm excited to share some of those stories with you. But thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to sharing all those stories and many more next time on the Movie Insiders.